Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Today we're here to recap our thoughts, our takeaways, what we took the most out of from General Manager Joe Schoen's midseason presser at the bye week. This happens a lot, I think, for GMs with the Giants, especially. We saw it with Dave a few times, Joe in the past. Midseason, or I think I said midweek. I meant midseason. They'll give you a presser. They'll give you a little piece. You know, Joe doesn't say much, I don't think. And I tweeted this after it, Nick. My first takeaway was, let's not forget what happened on Hard Knocks when we saw Joe sit down with somebody from Giants PR, and he's like basically going over the questions that might be and will be asked to him at the pre-draft presser and giving him the right answers for them, or, at least going over what could be said and ways around it. So I did feel like it was a bit robotic. I did feel like it was a bit planned. I didn't think he really broke character at all, but he did at one point come close to breaking character when Duggan pressed him on the quarterback question and said, wait a second, because he said, would you do anything differently this offseason at quarterback? And he said, no. No. He said, such as Russell Wilson, when you brought him in. And he kind of paused and then said no. So it was a little bit of a character break, and then he was back on track with the whole boilerplate stuff. So I want to make sure we don't take it fully at face value, and we don't think that this is exactly what Joe Schoen thinks about this team, about this roster, about this quarterback position, quite frankly. But I want to talk about what he said, because there are a lot of things that are interesting here. And I think the first thing is this idea that he's preaching, despite the season being 2-8, that the Giants aren't very far away. And his reasoning for it, Nick, and we can get into our reasons for if we agree or disagree with him. I think that's what people want to hear. But his reasoning is that the Giants have been in 6 one-score games, and I believe they're 1-5 in those one-score games. Now, I thought Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants had a really good stat pull right after this presser where he said, this is how meaningless that stat by Joe Schoen is. In 2020, the Giants were 6-10 and lost 5 one-score games. We know that 2020 team had no hope whatsoever. We were sold some bullshit bill of goods by the Giants homers who looked at these wins against backup quarterbacks and said they're building a culture. But the reality was that team went nowhere and wasn't going anywhere. 2019, the 4-12 Giants lost 5 one-score games. Anyone who watched that 2019 season knew that wasn't a playoff team or anywhere close. 2018, the year before they drafted Daniel Jones, the 5-11 Giants lost 8 one-score games. And that team, of course, was not ready to compete or ready to for Super Bowls or really competitive at all. So that's where I want to start. Is this a fair take by Joe Schoen? Is it okay to look at it like, you know what? We're building continuity year over year. We're trying to keep the pieces together, and we're losing close games. That shows that we're close.
I'm not sure if we should even look at it as is it a fair take? I mean, this is Joe Schoen's best excuse at this point, right? You need to preserve your job at this point in time with it being year 3 and the Giants struggling and this product being out there. However, I do tend to lean towards what Joe Schoen is saying and say, this is a better roster than 2020. This is a better roster than 2019. And I do believe that. I think and I'm so glad Duggan did such a good job. Duggan pressed him on the Russell Wilson question. I'm not sure if the Giants are a playoff team with Russell Wilson, but I am sure that the Giants do not suck and they're not this big of an embarrassment if Russell Wilson was on this roster right now and if Brian Daboll and this organization had the cojones to pull Daniel Jones after week 2 against Washington.
Or just name Russell the starter preseason.
Or just name Russell.
Give him a fair chance to win, which he would have won because he's a much better quarterback than Daniel Jones.
Exactly. If there was a fair and equitable battle between Wilson and Jones, I think the Giants they'd be in a much better place. They would have more than freaking 2 wins at the moment right now. So I look at Joe Schoen and I say, that's your best excuse. You need to play that. That's your best card, right? You're a cards guy, right, Dan? Give me some sort of analogy to cards and Joe Schoen and how that was the card to play.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy. I don't know it necessarily there's like a card to play, but I guess it's like selling a story on the river. Like you were going for the flush draw the whole time. You called the flop, you called the turn, the flush card comes, the person checks to you, and you decide to bet like you have the flush when you don't have the flush. That's essentially what Joe Schoen is doing because he doesn't have a flush here, right? Like this team is not a flush yet. It's still a flush draw. We're still on the draw with the New York Giants.
I had faith in you, man. I knew you were going to pull that one out.
I figured something out that was somewhat relatable and remotely close, but not that.
That's exactly what Shane is doing here, man. That's exactly what Shane is doing, and I can't begrudge him, man. Like, this dude was like, when he went into this, it was like, let me just get this over with. Like, this is going to be horrendous. It could have went worse, honestly. Like, we didn't really get too much from him, and you're right, he broke character with you don't really wish you want to do more without the court. Like, the way Duggan asked it, I was like, good job, Dan. I was like, that's the way you asked that question, and he was like, no. I was like, oh, dude, Shane's just getting it right now.
And he gave us the normal boilerplate stuff, which I think placates to a lot of the Homer fans. Like, it's a full team. It's not just one guy. And he even gave that stupid comment about how Daniel Jones wishes he could have some throws back this season. Come on, Joe Schoen. No Giants fan wants to hear that anymore, that he wishes he could have some throws back. There's not some throws back that Daniel Jones wishes he could have. There's some full games he wishes he could have back, like Carolina and Cincinnati. And I know for full well, if Russell Wilson was a quarterback, they would have at least those 2 wins. Cincinnati, the defense dominated. I was at that game. There were open shots missed downfield. He didn't even move the ball in the second half. They didn't even throw the ball past 5 yards down the field because they were so scared to, because Cincinnati was playing up. The Carolina game, it's without a doubt they would have won that game with any quarterback, essentially. Arguably, Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito would have won that game, considering all the misses. And then Dallas with the missed shots downfield that would have changed the entire game that Jones was just god-awful on. They probably win that first Dallas game as well. So there's 3 games that I have circled where they'd be closer to a 5-5 team, I think, with Russell Wilson.
Don't worry, a football decision is coming.
I think it's pretty obvious from a feel standpoint, and we'll get to the quarterback stuff in a little bit, that, and I don't want to get onto it right now just yet, that this is it. Like, Daniel Jones has played his last snap most likely with the New York Football Giants. But he didn't say that. He's not going to say that in this bye-week presser. That was never going to happen. But there is one thing, and I want to pause and get to it in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about are the Giants close, right? This is Joe Schoen's mantra right here. And his whole idea, I'll give you the quote, what he said. We've got to find a way to finish games, and that's what we'll do the rest of the week. But he's talked about, we're moving the ball, we're getting it down there, and we get in critical situations, and we're 32 in the red zone. So the Giants have scored. He says we got to find a way to put the ball in the red zone. That's a big part of it. The Giants have scored a touchdown on just 39.29% of their trips to the red zone. That's worse than the NFL. The Giants have turned the ball over there. They've turned the ball over on downs. They don't attempt passes that land in the end zone, so it's very hard to score in the red zone when you don't attempt passes that land in the end zone. And so, Joe Schoen's pointing out the problem here, Nick, but what we're going to have to try to do is figure out how close they are to solving that problem, right? So this idea that Joe Schoen is saying that we're close, we're in these one-score games. Well, our red zone offense is the worst in the NFL. And how close are they actually to solving that problem? And that's the question I have for you, because if that answer is they're not that close, well, first let's try to figure out, why is this happening, right? Why are they the worst red zone offense?
It's difficult to assess this when Daniel Jones is the common denominator on these offenses. Because if you change the quarterback, your red zone offense can drastically improve. And I'm not saying it's all on Daniel Jones. Let me pull a page out of Joe Schoen's book. I'm not saying it's all on the quarterback. But honestly, man, if you just insert the most important ingredient to an offense and you change that ingredient and you improve on that ingredient, then the whole dish could be better. The entire meal can be better. And then you might be able to actually punch it into the end zone a couple of times. But we won't know that until we see another quarterback come in here. And honestly, the other ingredients, they don't really inspire hope right now. Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. I don't know if they're going to challenge and throw it in the end zone a little bit more than Daniel Jones did. Daniel Jones did seem to be a little bit reluctant to target in the end zone a lot of the times, something that we brought up through the years. So maybe it can improve with Lock or Tommy DeVito. But one thing is for certain, there needs to be a change. You need to spice it up a little bit, okay? You need to change it up. You need to change them ingredients, and I think that is coming in due time.
It's like when I cook the meatball recipe that I use. It's a shout out to Mike Collins, my friend from college, his Italian grandmother's meatball recipe, and it's meatball and sauce.
What was his last name?
Collins. Yeah, his dad is Irish, but his mom is Italian.
You said Cohen at first. I was like,
no way.
I was like,
but there are actually a lot of Jewish Italian people in the world. It's a culture that mixes a lot, but Anyway, I don't know why we went off that, but it's like when I make that recipe, Nick, and I make the sauce from scratch and I make the meatballs from scratch and I go out to the store and I buy all the ingredients and I have fresh parsley that I cut up and I have, the sauce from scratch where I take the tomatoes out. I'm not making it with a sauce, a ready-made sauce. Everything's good. I have all my spices, but I have frozen meat that was in the freezer too long and it's bad now. And that's the main ingredient in the Giants red zone offense. And that's kind of the main ingredient. So Joe Schoen wants to tell us, look, and this is where it gets down to. He wants to tell us we're in these close score games. We're losing these close score games. We're close because of it. And we have the youngest team in the NFL. And the way to start winning these close score games is through continuity. And he's talking about bringing some of these guys back. And he hinted even at guys like Slayton and players that might end up being re-signed that we might not expect, that we thought might have been traded at the trade deadline. All good and well, right? Like the continuity idea, the building the culture. He even mentioned culture again, right? Something, you know me, I hate the term. I hate when culture is used for a 2-8 team. Just hate it so much.
Again, that's another one of those cards. It's a weaker card, but that's another one.
Yeah, it's another card that he can rely on. But he mentions all these things, and they're good and well. But to me, they're not really the reason why the Giants are losing these close score games. The reason they're losing these close score games is because they're not scoring on offense. They're the lowest scoring offense in the NFL. The reason they're losing these close games, these one score games, is because they're not scoring in the red zone. And you can talk all you want about these guys need to play more together and grow the culture together, or you can talk about the deficiencies of what's actually going on the field, the real X's and O's, the football of why they're not scoring and why they're not winning games and why they're not coming up with an occasional 60-yard touchdown bomb to change some of these close score games, right? Like it doesn't always have to just be, he mentions like, we're not making the plays in those final situations, these close games. Well, guess what? If you hit a 65-yard bomb earlier in the game, you don't have the close game at the end. You've already won the game. You've made the play to win the game. You don't put yourself in a position where everything's so tight at the end and you need to make these plays at the end, which, by the way, your quarterback doesn't make in the end anyway. So what it comes down to me, Nick, is this. I look at a graphic yesterday, and I wanted to bring this up to you, and I wanted to talk this through with you because I thought it was really interesting to me because it made me think a lot about what Joe Schoen's saying about how they're closer than most people believe, and then the record says. And on this graphic, the two leading rookies in the NFL, the leading rookie receiver in the NFL in receiving yards, Malik Nabers, the leading rookie running back in the NFL in rushing yards, Tyrone Tracy Jr. Tyrone Tracy Jr. wasn't even getting touches until the last 5 weeks. Malik Nabers has missed 2 games with a concussion, and they still lead the NFL in receiving yards. And then I take it a step further, Nick, and I look at the offensive line. Well, they had 2 bad games during the adjustment period. I don't even know if I consider Pittsburgh that bad. I guess we can call it a really bad game. It wasn't even bad. It was bad by real standards, not by past Giants standards where they're unplayable. I'll give them unplayable, I guess, in the game before. Outside of that, every game with Andrew Thomas, we had grades above 7 for the offensive line in pass protection. And since then, they played phenomenal against Carolina, and they played fine the week before, if not good, against Washington. So the O-line has taken a clear step forward. That's obvious to anyone who watches the tape. Then you look at the next position, right? We've talked about Tracy. We've talked about RB1. We've talked about wide receiver 1 with Nabers. You look at the next thing, Theo Johnson. He's coming up. He's developing. He's making plays, Nick. He's blocking well. I watched the tape. He looked good on the tape the last few weeks. I'm putting up a cut up together that I'll post on Twitter at some point. So then I look at the last factor, right? The last part of this offense. Like, why are the Giants 2-8 and the lowest scoring team and the worst red zone offense? Wan'Dale Robinson, Slayton, Hyatt, the secondary receivers. Well, I don't really care, and I don't have an argument for this, just the tape and what I see with my own 2 eyes, Nick, but I don't care what anyone says. My opinion is in a better environment, and by better environment, I mean a quarterback who throws the ball on time, knows how to throw with anticipation, knows how to lead a receiver into space, knows how to put a ball with the right ball placement and the right timing. I think all of those guys could be contributors to an offense, Nick. And I don't think it's a coincidence that every year the Giants receivers lead the NFL in drops during the Daniel Jones era. I don't find that to be a coincidence because I know that ball placement plays a role in drop passes. I know that when a receiver has to stop momentum and turn around and a ball's placed in a shit spot, but it hits the 2 hands, it could lead to some drops versus when a ball's in front of you and you can catch it in stride. I know that. I know it's not a coincidence that they lead the NFL in drops every year, basically with Daniel Jones, no matter who's at wide receiver, right? So then I look at it, Nick, and there's only 2 factors remaining. It's quarterback Daniel Jones, which Joe Schoen didn't want to talk about and didn't want to throw under the bus, and it's Brian Daboll, right? So that's the second one, and that's what I want to assess with you right now, because unless you disagree with anything I said there, any of the other positions on the offense, then first start there. But if you don't, if you agree with pretty much my entire assessment of this offense outside of those 2 pieces, Daboll and Jones, then let's start there, and I'll leave that to you.
Let's start there then, because I do agree with everything that you said. And I think the youth is exciting. That's another very powerful card that Joe Schoen played. And we knew that he would play that. That was certainly something Joe Schoen was going to harp on. And it's a reality too. Look, your head coach removed Mike Kafka from play calling, took over play calling, and now your offense is even more embarrassing than it was last year with Tommy DeVito as your starting quarterback. So to me, it looks like a saving grace for Brian Daboll could be turning to Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito and fixing some of the issues that we've been going over throughout this podcast and throughout this year, actually scoring in the red zone and putting some damn points on the football field. That might salvage Brian Daboll's job. If they turn to Drew Lock and they turn to Tommy DeVito, one of the two, and the Giants are still as inept as they were with Daniel Jones, I don't know, man. Brian Daboll might be gone at the end of this year, especially if we start seeing more of these effort concerns with Deonte Banks. That was a little bit of an awkward part of the press conference too with Joe Schoen. We could talk about that maybe in a little bit when they were getting into Deonte Banks. They were like, oh, wait, yeah, I guess that one was somewhat of a effort issue too. But, it was a good throw by Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb, and Tyler Nubin, he took a shitty angle. I was like, no, dude, Tyler Nubin's catching strays right now.
He did catch a stray.
But, yeah, so I think Brian Daboll, look, this is a big half of the year for him. Playoffs are out of, it's never a good thing when the playoffs are out of contention when you have a whole nother half of football to play, a whole nother year or half of a year to play, right? And the Giants are screwed from a playoff perspective. But if you can at least just prove that, hey, I do know how to coach offense, I can get my team motivated, and we won a couple games down the stretch, then maybe he gets another shot. If not, Giants may be in the market for a Ben Johnson or something like that. And that is high hopes because I don't think he would ever come to New York with their current quarterback situation.
Yeah, he's not coming here, Ben Johnson. He'll just go to the best quarterback available to him. It'll be either Caleb or Trevor Lawrence, his
Probably
pick.
Caleb, yeah.
I think he'll go to Trevor Lawrence, actually.
Yeah, actually, I
mean,
dude,
he fits his system better.
And not even just that, living in Florida rather than Illinois,
Right.
like from a tax standpoint, he's going to make so much more money going down to Jacksonville.
Yeah. And Brian Thomas Jr., though, I guess you could say the Bears have great weapons too, but the Bears have no O-line, not do the Jaguars. So both situations, he's not going to have that Detroit Lions O-line, and that's going to be a wake-up call for Ben Johnson no matter what.
It's like that's the catalyst to the offense too.
I know. I saw a post recently, the Penny Sewell and the Jamar Chase debate. It turns out the answer was yes. It turns out the answer is just yes. You can't go wrong no matter who you take. Those are two elite prospects. Who the Giants get in that draft class? I don't even remember.
It would have been 2021.
Oh, that was Kadarius Toney?
Yeah.
Was it? Was it the year with Devontae Smith?
It was.
Okay.
Look, we all wear underwear every single day, and we all have complaints. They ride up, they're not comfortable, they don't fit correctly. I shared these complaints until I started wearing Skims. When I tried Skims stretch boxer briefs, I felt like I finally found that missing link. They gave me all the movement I needed for the workout. They were comfortable while I was sitting here podcasting and watching all of this New York Giants film. Everything from the texture to the fit worked for me, and it will work for you too. It is a great product, and I highly recommend it. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows.
What I wanted to find out with you is I still want to come back to this, is, we've parsed it down, and I want to come back to this part of, like, the Giants are the lowest scoring team in the NFL, worst red zone offense. We parsed it down. We said we have a great wide receiver one, a great running back one. We believe in the ancillary pieces at wide receiver, even though others don't. I believe the environment is a big factor in that. We believe in this coming up tight end. We believe in this offensive line's improvement. And then Andrew Thomas comes back, and they were already good with Thomas. Bunch of 7 grades from us plus in our film review. So it's coaching and it's quarterback play as to why they're so bad this year. But what I want to parse down with you is we already know about the quarterback, right? I want to find out your thoughts on how much the coaching is a big reason of why they're last in scoring, because it can't be 0%. It's not 100% Daniel Jones. Even me, and I hate watching Daniel Jones, and I believe he's a bigger factor in this problem than anyone probably. But even me, I know it's not 0% or not even close to 0%. So that's what we need to figure out. Like, because they're dead last in scoring and they can't score in the red zone, how much of that percentage weighs on Daboll? And with that said, Nick, because I'm even talking about like pre-snap penalties and dumb shit that pushes them back. Is that because they're not prepared? Is that on the coaching staff, right? Even stuff like that. So, like, if that answer for you, and I want to know your answer, is at a certain percentage, that's when it gets to the next part of this presser from Joe Schoen, where he's asked about Brian Daboll and the coaching, and he's kind of gives a weird answer, like how he's evaluating everything. So sort of type answer from Joe Schoen, which I thought was really interesting. So that's where it gets to that point, because we have to make that decision. Like, fans are allowed at this point to be like, I don't know if Brian Daboll is the guy, and I don't know if Brian Daboll deserves to be back with the Giants. I don't know if this is a good thing, because they're dead last in scoring and they don't score in the red zone. With all this talent that we just mentioned everywhere but quarterback. And at some point, it can't just be the crutch of, for Daboll at least, like, it's all Daniel Jones's fault. It's all the quarterback. We know it's a lot. Like, he's really bad at football, but it's not like, it can't be 100%. So where are you at with that?
I don't have a percentage.
Okay.
I don't really know how to quantify it, but he is the quarterback whisperer. He calls the plays.
Yeah.
He fired Kafka to own this job, to improve the offense, and it's worse now with better talent, a better offensive line, better receivers, that same quarterback. Daboll deserves a lot of blame here. A lot of blame. I want to see him with a quarterback that's not Daniel Jones in this season. I want to see if he can just start putting up 24 points, 27 points with Drew Lock. They might still lose games, and obviously you want them to win, but if the offense can just finish the damn job. I don't want 15 play drives, Dan, that ended 3 points. I want
0 sometimes.
Or 0. I want a 3 or 4 play drive with a long touchdown. I want an 8 play drive where he punches it in the end, in the red zone to the end zone for a touchdown. I want to see an improved offense overall. And if we can get that from Brian Daboll, I may be able to be won over to keeping him and retaining him as the head coach, depending on what happens with the locker room, which is still a big issue. But I'm not sure that we're going to receive that. And I'm very much not sure that Brian Daboll is this offensive guru that we all thought he was. We've watched a lot of this offense. I think he is designing plays. There were a lot of guys open against Carolina. Yes, there were a lot of guys, and they're
not every game. And I'm not, Carolina, yes,
exactly. There are also times where I'm like, "What are you doing on that play?" And then I look and Daniel Jones is not the answer. Daniel Jones didn't have a lot of options,
right? I see that
play.
Too.
It's just like, hey, we're gonna run 2 guys outside the numbers. They're going to run just streaks down the field. They're going to carry the deep thirds or the deep fourths. Then we're going to run Wan'Dale Robinson on a choice route, the number 2. And that's the first read. And then usually what happens is the safety flows over top. The outside cornerback sits on the out route along with the apex, who is playing inside leverage to allow Wan'Dale Robinson to run out directly towards the cut defender, who is that outside cornerback I was just referencing. So, and then after that, there's really just no one else. It's everyone else is kind of chipping and blocking. And then Theo Johnson releases like 2 seconds into the play, and that's your check down option. It just doesn't really seem like there are too many options in certain plays. So I have questioned him a little bit more this season than I even did last year with that disaster of a season after the 2022 season, which was a good year, but we definitely had our lulls offensively, especially in the middle parts of that season after the bye week when we had to give Saquon Barkley 36 touches to defeat a shitty Houston Texans team led by Davis Mills. So there are these question marks. I'm going to be paying attention intently towards his play calling and seeing what he can do with the new quarterbacks. I don't think Daniel Jones will be back as the starting quarterback. And, let the chips fall as they may, as they say, Dan, because if it's not a good product, what do you do? And I had the same impression as you with Joe Schoen when they brought up Brian Daboll and he's like, hey, we're evaluating everything. You don't really want to hear that if you're Brian Daboll.
But you don't want to hear if you're Brian Daboll, but I think at this point it is fair. And
100%
so
fair,
some might be surprised to hear this, but like my percentage might be higher than you think it would be. And I've narrowed it down to those 2 because you can feel how you want about the rest of the receivers. I know they have some flaws to their game, but I just know in a real offensive environment, all 3 of those guys could be producers. It's not a no. I don't know it. That's my opinion from watching the tape on Wan'Dale, Hyatt, and Slayton. But so then it's really just coach and quarterback. And I am higher on the percentage than coach than you'd probably think I might be listening to this podcast, because I think about it like this, Nick. I watch a lot of football, and I know you do too. We watch every Island game. We watch some tape of other teams. We watch tape of the team that played the Giants. We see a lot of shit, man. We see a lot of calls. We see a lot of play callers, and we see a lot of in-game moments. I feel like Brian Daboll isn't the coach that like a Ben Johnson type that I watch and I'm like, wow, that was such a good call in that moment. He did that for the flea flicker this week. He had that moment of, wow, that was such a good call in such a good moment, and he beat the defense and he got him. But he doesn't do that a lot. I think he's very conservative in third and short situations. I think he's very conservative in second short situations. I think he doesn't have a lot of tendency breakers. I think his red zone offense is worse than Mike Kafka's red zone offense, considering the quarterback. And that's fair because that's your quarterback. You have to figure out a way to score in the red zone with a quarterback who can't process tight spaces. Like you need to run him more or something, or like do more misdirection. Whatever Mike Kafka was doing, bring it back. Just run the same playbook. At least give it a shot. Like you may think like, oh, defenses have figured it out. And that's fine. Maybe they have. They have a lot of tape on that shit now. But like, at least give it a shot. Like, because what you're doing right now is not working in the red zone. Asking Daniel Jones to be a real quarterback in the red zone is not a viable strategy at this point because he's not a real red zone quarterback. He can't process confined spaces and he can't get the ball out on time at any point. So you have to gimmick your offense in the red zone, something he's not doing. You don't have the play calls in the right moments like we talked about, right? The route combination, something you talked about, Nick. Now you talk about just take it beyond just the red zone offense and their lack of scoring. It's all his in-game decisions, all the other things that go into coaching, the mental errors, the guys who, maybe he didn't have a good effort on this play, the Deontay Banks stuff. It's getting to a point with me, Nick, where like, if it wasn't for the fact that I hate head coaching searches, and I think that there's going to be shit options for the Giants outside of Brian Daboll, and I want somebody here who can develop the quarterback they're likely going to draft in this draft, because I think they are going to draft a quarterback in this class, I would be way more on the train of fire Daboll. I'm just scared of the options outside of him because I don't love a Mike Vrabel hire personally. I'm not as into it as others are. I'm scared of what the offense could be if Mike Vrabel comes in and brings in like some shit offensive coordinator that happens all the time. Bill Belichick, similar situation. He's the best coach of all time. I'm scared of what the roster could be if he has control over personnel and things of that nature, which I don't even know how that would work with a Joe Schoen type. And outside of that, there are some intriguing names, Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson. I don't think they want to come coach here. Why the fuck would they, honestly? Unless they like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, and the Giants are in a position to draft a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward or whoever ends up being the quarterback that they believe in, these coaches, I mean. So it's more for me like being scared of the other side, and the grass is not always greener with Daboll than confidence in him, because I believe he's not as big a factor, obviously, but a big factor in why the Giants are dead last in scoring and worse in the red zone.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. And what gets really tricky too when it comes to keeping Daboll and then drafting a quarterback and the Giants sucking next year. So what do you do with Daboll? Do you fire him and have a new system be brought in? All of those factors need to be considered by John Mara, by Steve Tisch, and by the New York Giants front office in general.
I'll tell you one factor that should be locked and loaded, and I don't care what anybody says. If the Giants draft any of these fucking quarterbacks in this class and they somehow get the number 1 overall pick in 2026, you dump that fucker fast and you take Arch Manning, and you don't think twice about that one. That's a funny scenario because it's not going to happen, and I don't even want to think about it. It's so stupid to think we could ever get Arch Manning. It's so many freaking things have to fall into place for that to even be possible. It's like that's a true one-outer in poker right there. The Giants getting Arch Manning on this roster is a pure one-outer. You have one card in the deck with one card to come. You're heading from turn to the river. You need to get so many things have to fall in place for him to luck his way into the Giants.
You're not wrong, but I don't know if it's a one-outer, and I don't know shit about cards. But if you look at the probability of who selects high in the draft in recent memory,
true, that's fair.
Giants pick high a lot.
It'd be like a one-outer for like the Chiefs. It's not a one-outer. The Chiefs would be the one-out. If the Chiefs are the Chiefs are like a zero-outer. They're like a runner you would need. But that's when the exact two cards have to happen twice in a row. That's 0.001. The one-outer, I believe, is 2% chance. So the Giants are probably closer to, like, you're right, like a 4-outer, like a gut shot to the river. They have a better shot than most.
But to bring this back in a circular manner, the roster is better than I think we want to give credit for. Like a lot of
offensively.
Yes.
We haven't touched on the defense yet.
There are defensive issues. I think there are cornerstone defensive players on this roster. Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns.
But then cornerstone defensive issues, run defense, secondary.
Yes, run defense and second. And the run defense sucks, man. Like it's there. You can tell by the way Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden are reacting that they have so much on their damn plate. And that defensive line needs to do a better job shoring up. And the Giants, man, like, look, you have Azeez Ojulari out there. He's not the best run defender. Tomon Fox played, and you see him just losing contain or not getting towards the inside when he is that pursuit defender to clamp down on the B gap when it's right there, and he just misses the tackle, and that results in an 18-yard Chuba Hubbard run. The safeties are slow to fit. The corners, some of them don't have the effort that is necessary to play professional football. Like, what the hell are we talking about, ladies and gentlemen? So yeah, there are a lot of issues on the defense. And that's something that I don't know if you could just fix in one offseason. Maybe you find one really good defensive lineman, Kayvon comes back healthy, safeties get a little bit more instinctual because they're young. I don't know, but it's not good, Dan.
Yeah, well, look, I agree with you on that. And that's kind of gets into the, we've lost a lot of these one-score games. We're closer than we think. The only argument I had, and what you had as well, was really offensive based, right? Like they should be having a better chance to win this game because they shouldn't be last in scoring points in the NFL and they shouldn't be last in red zone, given the personnel outside of quarterback and coach. But defensively, that's when the argument becomes tougher for me, at least, that they're close, right? Joe Schoen's whole thing that we're closer than you think. Now, I do believe defensively, it could, all the arguments he made to me could play a bigger role factor. And what I mean by that is like the continuity and the younger players and players playing together. That on defense matters more to me than on offense. And offense, I think it's your coach and your quarterback that are really determining whether you're scoring points and good in the red zone. For the most part, they give and your offensive line, of course, but we've taken that step there. Sorry, you're smiling. What's going on?
No, I'm smiling because we just came out of an election season, right? And I'm just thinking like Joe Schoen probably had more pressure on him than the candidates did when it just like Giants PR being like, don't say this, you don't do this. like telling them like how to answer the questions and formulating a plan to drive home to the fan base. Like, look, don't call for my head. We're going to be fine. It's okay. The world's not burning. Everything is okay.
And he knew it was going to be painful. He knew it was going to be bad. Like he's coming in hot. Like these reporters were on his ass and the fans are on his ass. And it's just like such an interesting spot for him. You could feel it. That was the most annoyed I'd ever seen him in a press conference. Not just annoyed isn't even the right word for how he looked.
Defeated almost,
defeated, man. Deflated, frustrated, and dejected with what he's seen and what's gone on. And he's not going to tell us the truth on anything, Nick, and that's fine. And I understand, look, there are fans, and I don't blame them whatsoever. There are fans who would like him, who would like to get their pound of flesh when it comes to Daniel Jones. They'd like to hear a general manager hold him accountable for once in his entire tenure. And I don't blame that fan base and the people in that fan base who would like to hear that yesterday and didn't get to hear that because they've had 6 years. They've been subjected to this guy holding them hostage for 6 years. And there's been one good year out of those 6 years. And in that good year, they got blown out by their division rival in the playoff by 30 points in their one good year. The ceiling of that quarterback was blown out by your division rival in the divisional round, not even the conference championship or the Super Bowl. And then every other year they were 2-7 or worse with that quarterback. And this year, he's horrible, and he's 3-13 in his last 16 starts, Daniel Jones, and he has 10 touchdown passes or something ridiculous in those starts. So it's like, it's not just that, it's gotten to a point where it's not just that, like, he's bad. He's been unplayably bad for 16 straight games, and you forced your fan base to watch those games. You forced them to come to the games, to pay their money, to act like they have a chance, to build some hype for themselves in the offseason. So I understand the fans who want him to give him the pound of flesh. It's not going to happen, right? It will never happen in that, and it's fine. You don't want to throw your team under the bus. I'm totally okay with that. But what I will say, Nick, is there are some things that you just shouldn't say in the position that Joe Schoen was in, given the play that the quarterback has put on the field. And I think it's unfair to those fans when he says things like, I understand you guys want to ask about Daniels, the quarterback position. That's what comes with territory, specifically in this market. No, Joe, it's not this market. Every single market, every single fan base puts onus on the quarterback position because they're not stupid. They're being taught football by smart people, or they know football. They played football. They learn it. They put attention to it. And they know the importance of the quarterback position. So don't talk to us like we're 5 and, oh, it's the market's fault that we're putting all this onus on the quarterback position. This quarterback has been unplayable in 4 of 10 games this year. He's been backup level quarterback masquerading as a starter in 4 of the 10 games this year. 40% of the games, he's been unplayably bad. Cincinnati, Minnesota, Carolina, and Philly, unplayably bad in all 4 games. Watch the tape. It tells the entire story. So you don't tell us this thing that it's the market's fault, right? And I don't want to hear him saying all these things about how, look, it's not all one guy. It's not all one player. That's fine. You don't want to say it. He has some things. Daniel's played some good games. He has played some good games. I'm fine with that. But this thing, there's some throws he'd like to do differently. But in general, it's not one individual or an individual. It's not about some throws he'd like to have back, Nick. There's games where he doesn't make one good throw at all, and we're scrambling, me and you, to find best throw on film for our film review. We're scrambling in 2 of the 10 games. You came up with a 4-yard slant in one of them was yours, right? And I had a Theo Johnson throw around the line of scrimmage. And then last week we had one good throw, and the rest was like, oh, I guess that dig route that he completed a NFL level dig route for 15 yards when against this secondary that's giving up so much space the entire game because they're the worst secondary in the NFL. So like, that's the thing. When he says stuff like you said earlier, Nick, about like, oh, Tyler Nubin, when they're asking about Deontay Banks, he just throws Tyler Nubin under the bus, right? And he says,
I was like, dude.
he says he took a bad angle to the ball. But you laugh at that, Nick, and it's funny to some extent. But why? Some fans might ask, and I believe they have every right to ask, Nick, why is Nubin being held accountable at a different value than Daniel Jones? He's willing to throw Nubin under the bus for one bad play, but Daniel Jones has 7,200 bad plays in a season and never gets held accountable for any of them. And he's not willing to say one damn word about it. Just he wishes he could have some throws back. That was the extent of where he went with that.
That's why I said it was an awkward part of the interview earlier, because he broke character in saying that. And I could tell right after he said the safety took a bad angle, he was like, shit, I shouldn't have said that because everybody knows who the safety is. And now I'm throwing one of my players under the bus.
Yeah.
But he did praise Tyler Nubin before that. And I believe Tyler Nubin is a good football player. I think Joe Schoen is very high on Tyler Nubin. I think he's going to be a good player here for the New York Giants. But that was one moment where he broke character, and he was doing so trying to defend a player who is borderline a malcontent and who is not putting the necessary effort play in and play out to be an NFL professional starter. So he's covering for somebody who's not acting accordingly and throwing somebody who is acting accordingly under the bus. And I think, I think there was compunction right after he said it. I think he's like, damn it. But I can't express that. You know what I mean? Like, I have all these cameras.
Nubin, that's a great point by you.
No,
one guy's doing all the things right, and he's getting thrown under the bus. The other guy's getting made excuses for.
I think it was an honest mistake by Joe Schoen, because again, he was like, what? There was one play. And then someone was like, well, what about when Jerome Henderson called him out? And he's like, oh shit, that did happen. Yeah, but the throw was really good. And they got me. They got me.
Yeah.
It's a story right there. Someone should write it.
It might be the case. And look, now they gave some headlines to whoever's writing these stories. But, at some point, I'm with the fans to some extent who are like, why can other players be held accountable? But at no point has this quarterback ever been held accountable during his tenure with the Giants. At no point, man. And it's crazy. Different coaches, different general managers. No one's ever called out his play on the field. And at times it's been unacceptably bad. And everyone can see that with their own eyes. And it just never gets held accountable for. And I don't even think about it from the fan standpoint, right? The fans may find that unfair, and that's one thing. But what about the players? At any point, we don't know how they feel about this, right? We don't know if they listen to this presser. We don't know if they listen to the coaches during the week or any of these what they do with the media. They might not. They might tune it out. It's probably the best thing you can do. It's the best route. But there's no doubt in my mind that the defense on this team is holding Daniel accountable in their head. There's just no doubt in my mind when they could watch that tape back and see all those horrific plays he did against Carolina. And some of them were just worse than backup level. The third and 8 missed to neighbors, right? The flea flicker, all this stuff, the ball that died on Wan'Dale from that clean pocket that you went over when Wan'Dale ran that great route. These are all like backup level, like Fromm level type throws. Or decisions. And it's like, at some point, I know they're holding him accountable. So why are the Giants just never able to hold this guy accountable in 6 years? That's when I say, Nick, that I feel like I'm getting held hostage by this quarterback. That's what I mean. They've never held him accountable. They've never put the onus on him, really. And it's always somebody else's fault, or it's not one guy when it comes to this guy.
I personally don't want Joe Schoen to hold him accountable in front of the media. That's not
fine.
Like, it's not for us to see, right?
Yeah.
Hold him accountable by benching him. Hold him accountable by finally giving another quarterback a shot with Daniel Jones healthy. And that's not even considering the injury guarantee. You put the injury guarantee on top of it, it's like, well, no shit. What took you so long? You know what I mean? So to me, it's like, you need to bench him. That's holding him accountable to the locker room. That's
I respect that. I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair within the framework of us also agreeing that he shouldn't have said that about Tyler Nubin. And he made
of course. I think that was a mistake. And I think if you could give him some truth serum, he would be like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, I think that's
my
totally
take.
Fair. No, I like your take a lot on that. I've come around entirely 100% to that take. He did mention some players that have stood out to him: Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy, and Neighbors. Just like to talk about the players he mentioned. I think that's important to hear who they're talking about, and when they do actually say something, are there players that are on their mind as building blocks? All three of those are building blocks of Joe Schoen. All three rookies, and all three are playing really well. Theo, especially of late, and we know already with Tracy and Neighbors, those are building block pieces for us as we move forward through the next seasons. And it's a reason why it's a deep down reason why he says, I think we're heading in the right direction.
Look, man, for years, Dan, and I know this is deviating a little bit, but it's related to what Joe Schoen was saying. For years, we talked about the issues with this team, and there were a lot of them. Daniel Jones was always the number one issue. And a lot of the people who supported Daniel Jones, for better or worse, they said, well, let's get him an offensive line. Let's get him receivers. Well, kudos to Joe Schoen. He did get him an offensive line. This offensive line is better than any Giant offensive line I've seen since what, 20? Is it like 2008?
If with the 5 games with Andrew Thomas, it was better than any offensive line since 2008. I would say, though, some people argue
you can make the argument for 2011, but they weren't that great that
no,
year.
not
That was
11.
a lot of
11, they were dead last in pass blocking.
Yeah, but they still won a Super Bowl, so they were. I get it. They were dead last in a lot of the metrics.
09, I think, was pretty good. If I remember,
was
maybe
good. Okay.
13, either 13, 14, or 15 might have been decent. I'm not sure, but I don't think as good as the first 5 games with Thomas.
Yeah, my point being, though, the offensive line was fixed. You got the star receiver. You have other, I would say, quality receiving assets. You have some young players on offense who are making plays for you. And this team is still dreadful. This team is still dreadful
on offense
right now. So Joe Schoen did fix that offensive line, and I'm happy for that. Now we just need to see the primary problem that we've been discussing over the years removed from the offense and have somebody else step in and see if anything else changes. I just don't know.
That's part of the problem, though, Nick. So this is part of the issue with the core for me. So yes, you're going to be removing I don't want to call it the word I was about to call it, but the problem with the offense, right?
You weren't. You can't use that word. Jeez, man.
I wasn't going to use
Just
that
go
word.
on. Just go on.
Oh, he certainly has been for this offense. I was going to remove the problem for the offense, but that's only part one of the issue that you've had as a franchise for 6 years, right? And that's the easy part. That's the thing none of us have talked about yet, Nick. This is the easy part. It's been really hard for them to move on from Daniel Jones. It's been hard for all these different regimes, these coaching staffs, but we've known that this should have been done a long time ago. This was always the easy part. Do you know what the hard part is? Finding someone who's better, or not even better. It's not hard to be better. Finding someone who's good. Finding a good quarterback in the NFL is really hard to do. Removing Daniel Jones, step 1. Step 2, finding the good quarterback. Well, here's your options right now. It's Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock. Those are as bad options you can find for replacing him. Next offseason,
it could be worse. It could be worse.
Could it?
Yeah.
We
had Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm back in 2020.
Yeah, but that's unheard of what the Giants did that one year. But I'm saying, looking around the NFL, how many worse backup situations are there than Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock? There are some, right? I guess the Mac Jones is one of them. Like, there are definitely some out there, but they're not.
Your point's well taken, especially considering the Giants knew Daniel Jones's limitations going into this.
Well, that's a whole nother thing. But I'm just saying in general.
That's back into this.
Part 2 of this is finding better quarterback play.
Yeah.
Because the easy part is getting rid of Jones. So then you have the offseason. Now your options are free agency in the draft. That's not easy either always. That's not always wrought with options. It was for the Commanders and Patriots and Bears this year, but it was not always wrought with options. So that's the next step. And that's the hard step. So he's done the easy part. Great. Good job. Kudos on you. You finally figured it out that you got to bench this guy. Good job. It took you 6 years, but you finally figured out this is part of the problem. Now the next step is solving the problem. And that's not necessarily going to happen with Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. And I can't wait for the day, Nick, where the Daniel Jones homers, if Drew Lock struggles, are like, see, I told you it was Lock, though it wasn't Daniel Jones the whole time. Because remember last year when Tyrod Taylor outplayed Daniel Jones on tape to anyone and in stats on tape and everything, won a game with the Giants, and everyone's like, it doesn't count because he played with Andrew Thomas and Daniel Jones doesn't play with Andrew Thomas. Well, Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito aren't playing with Andrew Thomas. So that hypocrisy is about to come out in full force from these people. And I just can't wait to expose it immediately when I see it. The minute I get a tweet reply of that, I'm blowing them up on a quote tweet and I'm putting them out for everyone to see how hypocritical and stupid these people actually are. No offense to you. If you're one of them, I'm sorry. You're not stupid. You are hypocritical. You're not stupid. You're not listening to this podcast anymore. So it doesn't matter. We don't have people like that listening to our pod. So I'm not really that worried about it, Nick, but hopefully I didn't alienate some people. It's a fair point I made. If you can criticize, if you don't count those Taylor games because Thomas was there and he wasn't there for Jones last year, you can't count these games the same way. You understand that whole thing. Yeah.
Yes, we get it, Dan.
But I will say this that means nothing, Nick, and I just had a little fun with that. But I will say this on the point about Daboll that you made that actually means something earlier. Like Daboll now has to prove that he can move the offense with Locke and DeVito. That's not an easy task. Like that's the thing. Like getting rid of Jones. That's kind of why he's probably stuck with Jones for a while. Like Jones is 3 years in this system, tons of reps with these receivers, rapport's built. These guys coming in have nothing. They're just coming in fresh. They have a week of practice, 2 weeks now. They're going to give Locke, and you got to hope that the timing is there, that he understands the system, that he can get into checks, that he can do all these things without having any real experience in this system.
The slow identification of the problem with this offense could be what brings down Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll.
Yeah.
Because you're right. We have identified the issue. I think that issue is well identified now by Joe Schoen, by Brian Daboll, and it's going to be rectified. Now you need the solution.
Yeah.
Where is that solution going to come from? And that could take over a year. That could take a long time. And I think, dude, look, man, Daboll and Shane, they had the 2022 season. They look at Daniel Jones, first guy in, last guy out, all those coaching cliches. I think he does well in practice, knows the offense, all that shit, right? And then he's big. He was young. He's athletic. And you consider all of that, and you're like, you know what? We can probably win. This is our best chance to win. But when you don't have high-level quarterbacking skill, you're going to get exposed in the NFL once you're figured out, and especially once the offense is figured out. And that puts a burden on Brian Daboll to coach better games and be so precise with his coaching. And he can't take risks. He took a risk on Sunday, and it paid off tremendously if the quarterback got rid of the football instead of holding on to it for a second, right?
Right.
So,
and the flip side of that, Nick, was what he's been scared of and concerned of the whole time. A sack that takes him out of going for it on 4th and 1 and takes field goal off the board. So it kind of proves him right in a way, too, of why he wasn't calling those.
And that's why I'm not fully on board of Daboll has to go, because I understand the limitations, not from personal experience, but just from covering the game and being around the game. There are significant limitations on a play caller when you don't have confidence in your quarterback, and you need to ensure that every play call is precisely called against that defense, and everything needs to be great. And you can't take the risks that some coaching staffs do take to maybe spark an explosive play, to set something up. You need to be perfect with everything. And when you have a quarterback like Daniel Jones, dude, Daniel Jones isn't going to bail you out of a bad play call. Daniel Jones isn't going to rise above the level. So everything needs to be perfect for Daniel Jones to have success and for Daniel Jones to put up 24 points on the freaking scoreboard, which isn't really that much in the modern NFL. So, you know, on a given week, of course.
Even taking it a step further, like, and it's a really interesting point that you made about how, you know, from the coaching standpoint, what it goes through his mind, how he calls a game, given that limitation that you brought up. Just taking away even just the explosives, right? Like you drop that amazing flea flicker play and your quarterback fails you on it the one time you give him it and it's perfect look and the receivers are open. How about just the fact that, like, you have to draw up as a coach, you have to draw up the perfect pre-snap determination, because your quarterback is a pre-snap determined look on that read, lock on that read, and never has a solution off script. Everything for this quarterback his entire time with the Giants has been on script. If a play goes right for the Giants, it's because it went according to script. They determined it pre-snap and it was there after the snap. When it doesn't go right, it's because of the opposite. And there's not much room and margin for error. There hasn't been much of an in-between during the Daniel Jones era. There isn't just that too many examples of, oh, it didn't go according to script. The defense adjusted post-snap. They took away the pre-snap determination, and then something else happened away from that play on the backside of the play. Because that just doesn't happen often with him, and that makes it even harder to coach, right?
Like, of course. Wait, you're telling me you don't like 2-yard rushes that get tackled way too violently at the sideline when he's just trying to escape the pocket?
Yeah, Jesus Christ. It's
been rough.
It's a nightmare. It's been a nightmare, honestly, to cover this team on offense. It's been a nightmare to watch this team on offense. The nightmare is finally over, it seems. And I do believe it has truly been a nightmare for me, at least. And I think a lot of fans share that opinion.
Yeah, but this could be one of those situations where you have a nightmare. You wake up, you take a sip of water, you go back to bed.
What I was about to say. Nightmare, and another nightmare comes. That's what I was saying. It's easy to end the first nightmare. You wake up, you walk, you take a walk, you go take a piss, you do whatever you need to do. You throw some water on your face. But sometimes when you go back to sleep, you're right back in that dream, and it's a little bit different. And that might be the case with Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. We don't know that yet. Now, I have some faith, Nick. We don't have Andrew Thomas like we had last year, but DeVito did move the ball at times last year without Malik Neighbors, without Tyrone Tracy, with a worse offensive line overall. I honestly feel like even with Andrew Thomas playing gimpy hurt last year when he came back, the O-line as it stands today with Luminor at left tackle, and I hope Evan Neal can hold up at right tackle, is better because the interior offensive line is so much better, and because Carmen Brasillo, and because the ancillary pieces as well, Manhertz and Theo Johnson, are doing a really good job as well on the line of scrimmage. So I do feel like they will give him a chance with Neighbors, with Tracy, that they didn't have last year, a Neighbors or a Tracy.
Dude,
we could talk Barkley.
We could talk ball all the time, and I don't want to stray too far away from the overall point of this podcast, which is Joe Schoen. And yes. I'm looking at this right now. Before we get out of here, heading into the 2023 season, Joe Schoen made a lot of, I think we deemed it calculated risks, and yes. They all blew up in his face. And a lot of that was roster decisions that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll made heading into the season, and how Daniel Bellinger got hurt in the first drive against Seattle. And now Darren Waller is your only tight end. So Darren Waller is effectively eliminated as a receiver. And I think he was going to be a huge part of that game plan. Like, you got embarrassed in prime time because, again, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was you didn't have depth at tight end. Joe Schoen rectified that this year, brought in a bunch of tight ends. One of them didn't make the team, and now he's like the second or third tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles. So still, there was talent there. The offensive line has been rectified. But heading into this season, there was another, you could say, calculated risk. I would just say a flat-out error, and not considering the reality of your roster, the reality of your quarterback position. And this was addressed thoroughly throughout the press conference. And that was, did you do enough at quarterback? It's something you've been saying for weeks, and you are spot on about it, Dan. And the one player, to me, because I posited the argument that, look, Drew Lock maybe was that, but Russell
still might be. We don't know.
And he still might be. And the reason why I said that is because Drew Lock was signed 1 year, $5 million. That's not going to affect your cap that much. Tyrod got more than that. Sam Darnold got more. All those guys got more than that. I don't think Tyrod wanted to be back here. But regardless of that fact, the Russell Wilson thing is the one thing I can't get over. Because the only reason you didn't bring Russell Wilson in here was because he wanted a shot at that number one. So you were guaranteeing Daniel Jones a shot at that number one. And I think Joe Schoen knows that. Joe Schoen didn't want to address it, and it got a little awkward at that part of the interview as well. And Duggan did a fantastic job pressing him on it. But that's something now you look at. What did Russell Wilson put up? 37, 28, and like 24 in his 3 weeks starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Dude, it's going to get even uglier if, and it's possible, they win a few playoff games. Like, they could win playoff games with Russell Wilson. And then it gets really ugly for the Giants and Joe Schoen.
To me, dude, and this is why it bothers me so much. I feel like Russell Wilson was the out for Joe Schoen. He was just some guy sitting there, and he was like, look,
that was the creative out.
You only have to pay me $1.5 million. That's all, because Denver's on the hook for everything else, because I can't make more than that, because then I lose all of that. So I'm sitting here, bring me in. I'm going to visit with you, New York. My wife wants to be in New York. I want to be here. I want to bring my family here. Just guarantee me a shot, not the spot. Guarantee me a shot at the starting quarterback spot.
And do you want a more, because some fans are asking for this. Some fans are really mad at him, and they blame him. And do you want a more engaged Malik Neighbors? Here's an easy solution. Let him get those moon balls from Russell Wilson in stride, like we've seen. Neighbors down the field with Russell Wilson would have been fun for every fan to watch, and it would have got him more engaged in the game. He's so disengaged because he knows all he's going to get is short and intermediate targets from this shit quarterback, and even those are going to be thrown off target. And then you blame him. Who the fuck wants to play with this quarterback? Don't blame him. It's sickening to watch this guy get blamed because he's been dealing with this unbelievably bad quarterback play.
I agree. I do wish Malik Neighbors was a little bit more of a professional.
Same. I wish he was, and he would be with Russell Wilson. So that's at fault of the GM to me, because I get it for him too. I wish he was more engaged even in a shit situation. I'm with you, Nick. Still, but my God, he was engaged with Jaden Daniels. He would have been engaged with Russell Wilson. Yes. I don't think people realize how hard it is to stay engaged when you're open and you don't get the ball, or when you're open and the ball sails over your head.
I agree. And I'm not sitting here chastising Malik Neighbors. It's not like the worst thing in the world. You could just tell he's despondent. He's he's upset. And that's
playing the lowest scoring offense in the NFL.
Yes. And he was brought there to ensure that did not happen. And it's not his fault. It's not Malik Neighbors' fault. No, we all know the issue with this.
He's had some drops. Yeah, he's had some drops. I give him that. He's
It's
had
gonna
some
happen.
drops.
He's also like
drops happen. Tyreek Hill led the NFL in drops last year. He was the best receiver in football, and he led the NFL in drops. That's what happens. Malik Neighbors had the most targets in the NFL. You're going to have some drops. Like, people have to get this drop thing out of their mind. It's like one drop, and that's it. That's it. If he drops a single pass, not a single pass can be dropped. I'm so sick of the drops thing, Nick. I hate the drops thing so much.
I mean, I want Malik Neighbors to stop dropping the football in high leverage situations.
I do too, but I'm okay with accepting there's going to be some drops sometimes.
Of course.
It's like it's going to happen. Tyreek Hill led the NFL in drops. What are we doing
here?
No,
I get that, but I can understand why fans are like, yo,
I get it.
I drop that third down pass like that. Like, we could have won that football game if he catches that, and that's a real statement. That does not take away from the fact that Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones.
And there were 60 other players in the game, right?
Exactly. But those 60 other plays came to a culminating point that resulted in one play that you did not come up with the pass that was put on your hands. So yeah. That's on Neighbors. I'm not saying that Neighbors is terrible or anything like that, but
let's be clear. None of those passes that he dropped were in the end zone. So they still would have had to score after those catches. If he had made those catches, Daniel Jones, who doesn't throw touchdown passes, still would have had to throw a touchdown pass at some point.
Yeah. And those, I guess, are the reasons why Joe Schoen says, it's collective. And it is collective, dude. But again, man, we already freaking made this point. It is collective, but some players have more responsibility than others because of the position they play. Is that a crazy thought? No, of course not.
Well, not just that, because of what they're putting on the field too, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But the quarterback position that's the burden of being a quarterback. It's on you, man. You touch the ball on every single play. You are the point guard. You are distributing the pass. You are running the offense. There is so much pressure on the quarterback. That's why teams like the Chiefs and teams like the Bills, who have these amazing quarterbacks, they're going to be in playoff contention every year. It's not just
2 losses combined, those teams right now, just 2 losses.
Yeah. And they're both from Buffalo too, because the Chiefs somehow just won't lose.
Yeah.
Well, they play this week.
They're not even playing at their best level either, and they're still winning games. Neither of those guys have hit their peak, either of them.
I don't know what kind of incantation Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes cooked up at the beginning of the season, because it does seem like some of these games they should have lost. But that defense, man, that's where it's like really complimentary too. This season, the defense is really playing out of their minds for Steve Spagnuolo. In the beginning of the year, Buffalo, I mean, I thought they were rude. I was like, dude, Josh Allen's going to have a huge fantasy year because he's going to be behind in all these games. But no, they really solidified down in the last 5 or 6 games.
Honestly, from just individual quarterback performances, I think that the best 2 quarterbacks and I'm excited to why I did a 3-minute cut up of one of these guys on Twitter yesterday that had the team of who he's on took it viral, which I was happy about. But just nice. It was fun just to talk to those fans and just see their reaction to this. Cause this cut up, man, I don't know if you have a chance to watch it. It's 3 minutes of your time, Nick. It's a 3-minute cut up of Justin Herbert. I mean, I think individually speaking, he's playing maybe better than Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes this year. And I don't think that's a bold take. Go watch the 3-minute cut up I did. What you'll see there is so many fantastic throws at all levels of the field. And so many examples, Nick, which this is the thing that I'm most impressed about with him and Harbaugh, of him coming off the play side and finding shit on the backside of plays. Like, this dude is really good at finding stuff on the backside of plays, Justin Herbert. And then he has the arm talent to just throw unbelievable passes. But it's 3 minutes of fun if anyone wants to watch it. And I'm going to do one for Burrow too, because I think I would bet those are the 2 that are playing the position the best, and Lamar. Those are the 3 that are playing the position the best right now over Mahomes and Allen, who I do think are ultimately better quarterbacks, Mahomes and Allen, just not this year, maybe.
Man, I hate the fact that Justin Herbert's younger brother went to Oregon. If he went to any other school, this podcast would be so much. Oh God,
and some fans will be like, "What do you care? Herbert's been a loser at the NFL level." It's like, do you guys now see how bad Brandon Staley was? Like, Brandon Staley was arguably the worst coach to ever grace the NFL. Held that team back so much. He was a defensive guru who made their defense the worst in the NFL. Now 1 year, the defense is turned around, and in addition to that, they're 6-3 with a real coach, Jim Harbaugh. And Herbert has no interceptions on the year.
It's tough,
diming up balls. 3 minutes of dimes you'll watch if you see that cut up. It's just 3 minutes of just filthy type stuff from an individual quarterbacking level.
Look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but you're going to be hard pressed to sell me that Daniel Jones is as talented as Justin Herbert. If you just watch them throw 3 minutes, you know what I'm saying?
No. If that's your opinion, I'll take it a step further, Nick. You don't know what you're watching, and I'm sorry to say it, and I don't think anyone has that opinion. So
No, I don't think anybody does, but there were people who would echo.
There were people who had that opinion.
After 2022, which is
there were some people who would take Daniel Jones over Justin Herbert. Just think about how that sounds. It's laughable. It really is laughable. I'm sorry to say it if that was you, and I apologize. And look, I've had bad takes, plenty of them. Josh Rosen, among others. So you're gonna have
everyone had Josh Rosen though, man, because Josh Rosen actually had pretty good tape.
I know. I don't know what happened to him. He had good tape. He just didn't want it. But it's not just that he didn't want it. He just wasn't good at the NFL level. It's not just
he also only got 1 year on a really crappy team.
He looked so bad though.
Yeah,
he wasn't good. I think that was just a miss for what I'm looking for. It changed that whole thing. That whole class totally warped how I view quarterbacks, man. It made me go from ooh, I want you to look good on tape and have good film at the college level to I want traits. I just because Josh Allen had such bad tape at Wyoming.
But even then, though, but even then, there's a lot of trait type quarterbacks
that don't work, like Zach Wilson. Yeah, it's very hard.
See, I didn't even look at Zach.
He didn't have the traits because he didn't have the frame. Yeah,
dude. No, I was never a Zach Wilson guy because this dude was what?
But I'll say this: if Caleb fails, and it's still way too early for that. But if Caleb fails, that'll be a good example of traits aren't everything.
But again, Caleb Williams went into an offense with Shane Waldron at his OC. Learn an entire new offense. Now that sucks. That stifles your development. If he fell into
so bad.
If he fell into a situation like Jane Daniels, he's probably like Jane Daniels right now. And that's not taking anything.
I don't know if I agree with that, actually, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because I think, and I'll say this, and I looked at it, and if you see some of the numbers, the off-target rates for Caleb Williams are wild on 20-plus yard and 10-yard passes. He's just been bad this year somehow. I think he's mentally in a broken place right now. He can get out of it, obviously. I hope, because he's so talented. But he's actually been bad this year, from an accuracy and a ball placement standpoint.
Hey, that doesn't surprise me. And there's definitely something else. I don't know if
there's something else weird going on.
I don't know if there's personalities rubbing people the wrong way because DJ
Moore is not on the same page with him. There's bad stuff going on.
There's
stuff going on there. So it is what it is. Jaden Daniels is just taking this league by storm, and
he seems to have just that personality that people gravitate towards.
Yes, but you know what else? Who's looked good on tape? And I know he has a lot of turnover-worthy plays, but outside of those,
Drake,
man, these Drake cut-ups that I'm watching, it's painful. It's painful to watch that.
I know
and that's with the worst possible situation in football. The Patriots O-line is averaging 30% pressure rates. They have no receivers on that roster. He's just literally doing it all himself. And the pressure he dealt with at UNC, I think, has prepared him for the NFL.
I agree. Now, the thing about Drake May, and we've talked about this, I think, a little bit on the podcast. Look, if he doesn't work out, he doesn't work out. But again, if you turn on his tape, it's I don't understand why more people weren't singing his praises. And I was pointing out those flaws that he had where he was just those are all things you need to acknowledge. But the fact that he can just hit his back foot and let a 30, 40-yard ball rip over a linebacker before a safety gets there, prompt timing, and that's on his tape time and time again. You just don't see that, Dan.
The thing you brought up, dude, during our film review of him this past April, the thing you brought up, which I still think is the most important thing that I've seen on his tape, both at UNC that you brought up from that tape and then now at the Patriots, it's the understanding of those in-breakers in the middle of the field, where to throw them, the confidence that you can throw them, the timing of it, and the velocity and the ball placement on them.
Yep.
And the touch that you said at UNC that when you watch, no quarterback you watched on tape last year besides him was really doing it any kind of consistent basis. I'm seeing it again with New England, and I'm like, damn, those are the ones that change. Those are the franchise changing throws right there.
Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but when I would listen to people who are draft experts, I'd be I got Drake May, he's just 6 or 7 quarterback, and I'm like,
I couldn't believe that. How could you have a 6'5" guy who can run the way he can run and throw the way he can throw?
To me,
6 or 7, the best quarterback.
I said this to you before. I think there's people in the draft community who just overthink things. They overthink and they overanalyze certain shit. And sometimes you got to keep it simple.
Kurt Benford called him Mason Rudolph with wheels.
Did he really?
How could you watch Mason Rudolph and Drake May and watch them throw a ball and ever compare those two? It's a repulsively bad take. It's nonsensical. It makes no sense to me. And I just don't know where that could possibly come from. Mason Rudolph doesn't throw a ball like Drake May. The velocity, everything is just different. He doesn't even have different arm slots like May has. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know, man. People over evaluate sometimes. You got to look at this baseline of like how like arm talent is a pivotal part. Now there's a lot more to playing quarterback, but if you can make those throws, your ceiling is going to be so much higher if you could figure out all the other aspects of quarterbacking that you may be deficient at right now in college.
Especially because it's not just arm talent, right? It's the thing you brought up. It's the wherewithal and the processing and ability to make that throw. It's the play make. He's just a ball. Like I watch his tape and he makes a lot of turnover worthy throws so far. The Pats, I think he has like 7 interceptions, something crazy, but he just balls out there, right? I watch him and he's just balling on plays. Like he's moving out of sacks and throwing it in places and running with it. He's just a true baller on the field.
It's play speed plus the arm talent. Because play speed isn't just, I'm fast. True. Play speed is processing as well. You're processing that defense and you understand.
Natural, by the way.
I got that safety. Yes, I got that safety's hip open. I know I'm going to have this throw. Boom, it's right there. I know that dig's going to be there. I can trust my receiver to be right there. I got safety gaining depth over there. Safety turned hips. I'm going to throw it. Let it rip right as you see that. Instead of being like, is that safety's hips turned? Oh, I think they're turned. Oh, wait, where's that other safety? Oh, maybe I should throw it. No, you can't be reluctant like that. You need to be prompt. Everything is quick in the NFL, especially when you're playing.
That's one of your best criticisms with Jones that I've heard from you throughout our years. Look, he just needs to always confirm it. He's not everything for him. It has to be confirmed in his mind. He can't, just trust that it's going to be there and that space will be open. And it kills you as an offense. It just kills you when you have to confirm everything.
We see it a lot too, man. We see it a lot.
Yeah, that's why our timing is so bad.
It's very subtle, and I've heard people on Twitter be like, "Oh, well, what do you expect?" It's like, dude, but we're talking milliseconds here, but those milliseconds are a massive difference when you're dealing with the best athletes in the world.
Which, by the way, just a quick way to end this podcast. I think a lot about that, and I try to frame my opinion on quarterbacks as I see more, Nick. And I think about like Jaden Daniels, and he's working so well at the NFL level. And I remember throughout the process saying, the one thing I do really like about Daniels is his release. It's just so quick. And you're talking about the milliseconds and how much they matter. When you have that lightning quick release like Daniels has, and the ball just comes out like that, you're saving those milliseconds, and then the timing is right. The ball gets out to the receiver in front of him, or the DB can't break on it.
100%.
And the best release I've seen so far in college by far out of these prospects, just pure release. Now, there are guys who can throw from better arm angles. There are guys who can throw with more power and velocity. There are guys who can throw from more distance, but with a tier 1 and huge drop off to the point where I actually think it's as good as Daniels, if not better, from just this pure one trait standpoint, release standpoint. And I finally watched a cut up of him. Is Shedeur Sanders. That is one of the most mechanically sound, beautiful releases I've seen in a long time watching quarterbacks. And I am super excited to watch his tape based on the little I've seen, because if you have that kind of mechanically sound release like that, you can solve so many problems as a quarterback. Those milliseconds you save, the fact that you can have repeatable accuracy because you have repeatable throwing motion that's mechanically sound, makes such a difference for your potential projection and upside. So that's just one thing I wanted to put out there.
100%. If you have a receiver who actually extends for the football, that also saves you milliseconds. So like football, again, it's true. Everything's symbiotic.
Back to the ball, like you said, with that Wandell rep. That's a good point.
Yep. Yeah, that was Hyatt who did that.
Oh, yeah, it was Hyatt. But then, Yep. All right. Well, it's been a long podcast. It went longer than we ever thought. We thought this would be like 30 minutes. We just got to talking football. This wasn't even that much about Joe Schoen's presser. It was a lot about just talking ball, talking scheme, talking what you need. I think this is when we're at our best. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If not, well, there'll be another podcast coming up soon. So you can like that one instead. But please subscribe, support the show, comment if you can. Let's juice this podcast up the page. Let's be quite frank about it. It's been a disappointing week on the YouTube page for Big Blue Banter. Nobody watched the defensive film breakdowns.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. Total waste of our time to some extent to do it. It feels bad. We still enjoy it, and I love talking ball with Nick, but it's like when it's that, it makes it really deflating for us to see it not even touch it.
Still getting downloads, at least. It's just YouTube.
We're still getting downloads. Thank you for the auto downloads on the podcast, but to see it not even touch 1,000 views is a really, really rough spot for us. And Nick did a film breakdown of Neil that also we didn't get takeoff. It feels like if we don't put Daniel Jones in the headline of these posts, Nick, they're just not going to be clicked on, which is a sad state of affairs.
For this too, there's good conversation in a lot of these all 22 about scheme that people won't ever see.
They won't ever hear it or see it. And it's a state. It's not your fault. It's their fault. It's this franchise's fault. We know that. But stick with us. because we're going to turn the page. I'm starting to line up some ducks in place for some draft guys that I want to have on to talk not just quarterbacks, but all positions in the 2025 NFL draft. Why not? What the hell else do we have to talk about? And I'll tell you what, Nick, I am excited to see a new quarterback in this offense and break down film of that, even if it is someone just like Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, who's not really that talented and I'm not that hopeful for. At least it's going to be something different, right? Maybe we'll see some backside digs. Maybe we'll see some post rips. Maybe we'll see some interesting throws that get us excited. Maybe neighbors will be able to be used in the deep half. There's just things that could happen that haven't happened, and maybe they will happen. So I'll look forward to that. For the rest of you, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.